Welcome to Life and Service. I'm your host, Catalina Lee, and this is the podcast where we talk about the hospitality industry and everything that goes into it. Every week at 7, we'll be releasing new episodes with many guests to come. Thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into the first episode of Life and Service. I'm your host, Catalina Lee. You can call me Kat or whatever you want because I can't hear you anyways. So I want to get started. Today, our topic is casual dining versus fine dining. A little bit later in the episode, I am going to have a guest. Her name is Kimberly Sanchez. Really excited for you guys to meet her, fellow industry worker. I do want to start out, though, by giving you my perspective on some of the things that me and Kimberly are going to be discussing later in the episode. So just a little bit of some background on myself as far as what I do in the service industry. I have been working in restaurants since I was 16 years old. I've held a bunch of different positions in the hospitality industry. I've worked as a host, I've worked as a server, I've worked as a food runner. I've done all the things. But I, have been doing this for a really long time. I'm 22 now, so you can do the math. I've worked in a lot of different kinds of restaurants. The very first restaurant that I had a job in as a host was a brunch spot, as many of you probably have heard of. I worked at First Watch. That was my very first job. It was a lot of fun. I was really young when I was doing it, so there was, not as much passion for the industry yet. That kind of grew over time. Now I work at a fine dining restaurant. I'm not going to say the name of the restaurant that I work at just because for privacy reasons, but it is a very elevated fine dining steakhouse. We do seafood as well, but we're primarily known for the steakhouse that we are, or the steak that, anyways, you get what I'm saying. So I really want to talk about the core differences between casual and fine dining. In my experience, the biggest day-to-day differences between the two is definitely when you're doing casual dining, it's very different in this in the terms of steps of service, which me and Kim will kind of touch more on. But you can kind of guess what those things are. Mise en place is a term that we use in fine dining. What that means is changing out your dirty silverware for fresh silverware. And there are also things that we're going to talk on that are fine dining standards that as a guest you may feel are just dining standards as is. And that's okay. Personally, when I worked in casual dining or before I worked in the industry at all, I didn't really think of these things as anything crazy because, I was somebody who grew up with a family who cooked at home. So that being said, when me and my mom would cook at home and eat together, I'm not changing my silverware between my salad and my chicken, but when you go to a restaurant, you're having apps, you're having soup, you're having salad, you're having your entree. And so between those things, you're switching your silverware, you're getting fresh silverware every time. Those are a standard that is very, very they belong to fine dining. That's the thing, The setup is also very different. When you go to a casual dining spot, you're getting a roll up that has a fork and a butter knife in it. Maybe sometimes a spoon, depends on where you're at. When you are at a fine dining place, sometimes most of the time the table is set for you. So you have a little bread and butter plate. You have your linen already on the table. You have your butter knife, your dessert spoon, your entree fork, your appetizer fork, and it's set up in a very specific way so that when you are dining, you're working from the outside in. So, you're starting with your salad or your appetizer, you're using that appetizer fork. So those are just one of the big things that is definitely a big difference. As far as guest experience when you're going between the two, casual is very different. The level of service that you're getting from your server is very different. You're treated as very friendly. You're using greeting words like, hey, y'all, or, if you're from the South like us, you're saying things like y'all, or you're going up to the table, folks, how are we doing? You're not really like trying to get to know your guest on a personal level. You're just kind of giving them that same cookie cutter service that you're giving all your other guests. Now, sometimes if you've been serving for a really long time, there are servers who will get really personal with guests because they're trying to get to the ultimate goal of making regulars, because for servers, that's a big way of how you make your money. In fine dining specifically, your goal as a server is to make every guest your regular. So even if it's you're just, going through the day, and you're not really thinking too much, you don't really care what your guest names are, whatever, that is still your goal, to make them a regular at the restaurant, to make them come back for you, to make them come back in general. So a big thing with fine dining is your guest's name. You usually in a fine dining spot will get a little ticket when your table is seated, and that has the reservation name on it of one of the guests who made that reservation. So if you're getting a two-top, that reservation card also says things like if they're celebrating a birthday or if it's their 20th anniversary or whatever. So let's say you get a table and the reservation is John Doe. You're going over, you're greeting the table, you're hi, Mr. and Mrs. Doe, happy anniversary. I heard it's 20 years, blah, 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 blah. That's the kind of expectation that you're setting. Also, when you're at a fine dining spot, when you're going to a fine dining spot, if you are celebrating, you're kind of under this impression that this night is intended to be special. So that being said, a lot of fine dining restaurants will have that table already kind of set up or decorated, or have a little thing on the table that says happy birthday or happy anniversary or whatever. So as a guest, those are a few different things that you're experiencing from service point of view. I definitely feel the pacing is a huge difference for sure. I think it's one of the main differences, that you'll definitely see when you're going to somewhere like Olive Garden. And in no way is this me trying to put down an experiences at Olive Garden as less than or anything. I love Olive Garden. But when you go to Olive Garden, your server comes over, you're getting your drinks, and then they're asking you about appetizers, and you're either getting an appetizer or you're not. And usually you kind of order those things together, but sometimes you have it set up where restaurant may be busy and you're getting things all at once. And that is okay, and it's okay with you, it's okay with the server, it's not a huge deal, because it's like I said, a casual dining experience, so you're not really worried about things coming out at the correct pacing. Whereas when you work at a fine dining restaurant and you're paying $100 per head, that's a huge deal. You're making sure your appetizers come out first. Then by the time they're done with their appetizers and you've removed those plates and you've gotten them fresh silverware, that those soups and those salads are landing. And when they're done with those things, you're taking those out of the way, and that those entrees are then landing. That's the kind of pacing that is really, really valued and really important. And it's something so small, and most of the time the guests don't even really realize that it's happening, but it's something that really elevates the experience behind the scenes. It's something so minuscule that they're not even really thinking about, that makes all of the difference, because it's happening so seamlessly in a way that they don't have to think about it. And that's exactly the point of fine dining. You should not have to think about a single thing once you sit down at that table. Also, just the knowledge that your server is bringing to you. I mean, when you go to a fine dining steakhouse, you're coming in with the expectation and the assumption that your server knows what they're talking about. If you're asking, oh, where are your steaks sourced from? You expect that they know the farm. Oh, what kind of, if I want it this temperature, what is that temperature going to look like? If you're ordering a dry aged steak, how long is it dry aged? This is the kind of level of knowledge that you're just having an expectation that your server already has. As far as pairings, asking them about wine. Oh, what cocktail is really good with this dish, et cetera, et cetera. And you're kind of expecting that your server can deliver those, recommendations properly, and that they're not just someone who's there like, oh, I haven't really tried that yet, but I've heard it's really good. That is like the worst thing you want to hear. You want to ask your server, hey, between this dish and this dish, like, what do you think? Which one is better? Whatever. You want your server to like really get to know what you want. Personally, as a fine dining server who works in a steakhouse, if my guest is like, oh, well, what do you like better, the filet or the ribeye? My first question back to them, because you should always be following up with questions, especially if you don't know the guest and this is not somebody you've ever dined with before or met before. You should be asking them, okay, what kind of cut of steak do you usually prefer? Do you like something that's a little more lean? Do you like something that, is a little more fatty with the fat marbled? Like, that's the kind of thing that you're asking, because, when you work in a steakhouse, you should know the difference between the cuts, because that is how you're providing your guests exactly what they want. And when a guest is getting exactly what they want, to the expectation that it's already amazing and it's gonna taste amazing regardless, you're making that experience so much more memorable for them. So that's something that's like really, really important to me. As well as like the formality, like when you're at a casual dining spot, like I said earlier, they're talking to them very casually, like kind of giving that cookie cutter service. When you're in a fine dining spot, most of them, like I said, are trying to make every guest a regular. You're addressing them by name. You are using Mr., Mrs., Miss, etc. You're using all of those things because you want them to understand that you have a level of respect for them, but also you value the fact that they're even in the building. So you're getting to know them. Oh, what do you do for work? How long have you guys been married? If they mention that they have kids, oh, how old are your kids? Those are the kind of things that you are asking about, because you want them to feel like you are getting to know them and like you're hearing everything that they're saying and you're really interested. And so then when they come back and they're sitting with a different server or in a different section, that server knows, oh, how are your kids doing? They started school recently, etc., etc. That's the kind of thing that they're like, wow, like those are things that blow them away. Or if they like a certain wine on the menu and you're like, hey, would you like to start off with that Cabernet that you enjoyed last time? Those kinds of things really just like make a guest. The key difference, and this is what I say all the time, the key difference between casual dining and fine dining is when you are doing fine dining service, your guest should feel like a guest in your home. The way that you tailor the experience exactly to that guest, that is the kind of service that you give when you host somebody at your own home. And that is like the most beautiful thing about fine dining that I love so much. And that is why I continue to work in fine dining over everything else. So also there are different just like service standards and rituals that are really unique to fine dining, like bottle service when you do wine, crumbing the table, which I'm also going to talk more about later with Kim. Silverware changes, we've already touched on that. Just little things like I was mentioning earlier. I definitely think there are things in casual dining that I wish were standards, or like things in fine dining that I wish were standards in casual dining. I'm going to talk mainly about that with Kim later, just because I do want to get her perspective on it. We have pretty much had the same amount of experience as far as like the kind of restaurants that we've worked at, so that kind of thing. So I do just want to like really touch on that with her. But without further ado, please welcome my guest, Kimberly Sanchez.
Hi, y'all. My name's Kimberly Sanchez. I'm so happy to be here on the very first episode of Life in Service. Kat, thank you so much for having me on as your first guest.
Of course. I'm really excited that you could be here. So I do just want to get like right into it. I've already kind of touched on some of the more basic stuff. I've talked a little bit about like the core differences between like casual dining and fine dining, as well as like, you know, the training and the skill set that kind of goes into those things. To get started, I do want you to touch on like what your experiences are as far as like your job experience. So like tell us about like your very first restaurant job.
Absolutely. So my first restaurant job was actually my first job. I went off the deep end. I was a sandwich artist at Subway.
Nice.
That was a very big job, if you will say. I will say, honestly, like, you go into your first job thinking you know what you're doing. It wasn't really that. I was thrown off the deep end. I was the youngest person on staff.
How old were you?
I was 17.
Okay.
The next youngest person after that was 22. So I was the very much youngest person there. So everybody was just kind of a well-seasoned person there at Subway. And it was like a really busy one. It was next to a hospital.
Oh, wow.
So nurses would come in, and we were a 24-hour Subway.
Oh.
So nurses were coming in and out, you know, all the people from the hospital were coming in and out. So we had continuous rush hours. And that really taught me what a rush hour really was, you know, what a good bump in the service was. And that was quite interesting and scary. I'm not going to lie.
So as far as like when you started working in like actual restaurants, were you only ever a server? Did you ever hold any other positions?
No, so actually my first traditional restaurant job was at the Cheesecake Factory.
Nice.
I was a host.
Okay.
That was my first time working in a real traditional restaurant. And then I was hosting for about 4 months. I guess I was really good at what I was doing, you know, being a host. And so, you know, the server manager was like, hey, like, you're really good with guests. You really have a way about maneuvering certain situations. So we're looking at you to be a new server in our upcoming server class. And if you know anything about Cheesecake Factory, they kind of just group people together and train them to be servers. So that was quite interesting. But yeah, that was kind of my segue from my first hosting job to my first serving job. Another off the deep end serving job, really, because 200, 300 menu items is no easy feat in comparison to other servers that I know that started off at pizza shops and Chili's and all these other places, right?
So when you started going into fine dining, what were those kind of restaurants like?
Oh yeah, so my first kind of fine dining experience was at this like chef-owned restaurant. Very, very different in comparison to a corporate-owned restaurant for sure, but it kind of made me appreciate what is fine dining, what is chef-owned, and all that good stuff. Really brought forth a different type of knowledge in terms of menu, ingredient knowledge, back of house processes, how things are made, simple ingredient differences and how one ingredient can change a whole recipe and all that stuff. Up to like liquor and wine knowledge, you know, how you sell things, how you talk to people about things, and all like the real passion that drives the restaurant industry, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Me and Kim actually worked at that restaurant together, so that was definitely interesting. I think that's definitely one of the restaurants that brought us closer together for sure.
Absolutely. It was definitely a building block for sure.
So currently, what kind of restaurant do you work at, and are you a server?
Yeah, so I am a server. I am at a casual fine dining restaurant. Definitely casual, definitely a little bit fine dining, somewhere in the middle. But I love it. It's something nice, relaxing, you know, fine dining. I love the game. Just kind of hard every couple of months to really break into that scene. But the casual fine dining just really has a good balance on there. A little bit of wine, a little bit of liquor, great food, consistent schedule, all the good stuff.
So yeah, so glad you said schedule. I actually do want to dive deeper into something that I'm sure everybody watching is definitely really curious about, and that's the money, the hours, the lifestyle. So really quickly, let's talk money. How do the tips compare as far as like a casual dining spot in comparison to like a more fine dining spot?
Oh yeah, those are two very different leagues, I will say. You know, in the fine dining realm, you definitely do have career servers. You have people that have been doing this for 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you definitely see a lot more longevity and consistency in terms of fine dining. You know, you get your nice regulars that come in for business meals and will request you and only you, and you have your nice big banquets and all that good stuff. Where in terms of casual and all that stuff, it's more of just, you know, your Sunday night football friends, you know, those regulars that come in for those happy hours and all that good stuff that really keep the restaurant at its core, right? So I think that's like a big and major difference.
Agree. For someone thinking about moving from casual dining to fine dining, what advice would you give them?
Take notes.
Okay.
Have your personal journal.
Yeah, we know about a personal journal.
And ask questions. Ask a lot of questions. I feel like, you know, the more questions you have, knowledge is power. That's one of my biggest things. I've said that forever
especially
and ever.
in fine dining.
Absolutely. Even like the smallest things, you know, like, again, like the way you said, you talk to a lot of guests. Guests have a lot of knowledge too. You know, they're their own people as well. They have their own sub niches. And I've had conversations with guests about, you know, one of my favorite painters, you know, music, you know, all these little things that if you just speak from the heart and who you are as a person, take that into anything, you know.
Yeah.
But just like in the restaurant industry, that just really surpasses everything else.
Now, as far as like service, how do you see the future of restaurant service evolving, especially post-COVID?
I definitely think it's just more, of course, like in the casual aspect of things, you see things like barcode menus and things like that, which I am personally not a fan of.
I agree. I hate a barcode menu.
I feel like that's a different version of like AI taking over our, you know, jobs, right?
We're gonna have robots starting to serve us.
Right. I mean they do in like sushi restaurants, but on a higher level it's going to be insane. But I just think there's a bit more of appreciation for the guest experience.
I agree.
You know, there's that connection. You know, you went a year and a half, 2 years without really having that intimate exchange with a person, with a guest, right?
Right.
And learning from a bunch of like older servers that have been in the game for a long while.
Yeah, who, like, this is their career.
Right. It's like you pick on these little niches and stuff that they love, that they appreciate. Things that, one, make you money. Put more money in your pocket. But two, just expand the world around you. Give more of a guest experience. You know, it's all about connections, connecting, and just having a guest first mindset.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I hope that there never comes a time where like industry workers are just like redundant and there's no longer servers. I think that the personal connection that you can get from a server and the way that you can connect with a guest over food and over wine and over, you know, ingredients and everything that goes into that experience, I think that is so beautiful. And I think that's something that like I hold so dearly and I'm so passionate about because it is something so unique and I've never experienced connection like that, you know, with complete strangers, you know. And lastly, thank you so much for being here.
Of course.
One last question for our listeners who aren't in the service industry. Do you have any advice for them as guests going forward?
Definitely just slow down. Say thank you, you know? Slow down, appreciate your food.
Yeah.
You know, I promise you they'll get you that Coke refill. I promise you they're beating themselves up over it. But they just gotta...
They're having nightmares about forgetting your ketchup.
Right. The amount of times I've woken up in the middle of the night too. Oh my God, I forgot table 32's ranch.
Yeah.
it haunts us, I promise you.
Yeah.
So just be nice, be patient, be kind.
Yeah, be kind.
Tip your servers.
Oh yeah, we'll get into that in a later episode.
Oh yeah, and just slow down. Enjoy your food.
Yeah.
Talk to your server, or don't. It's fine.
It's okay if you don't want to be friends with your server.
A good
Totally
server will
understandable.
pick up on the body language.
On the cues. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it if you're not super social.
Right, and then speak up. If you don't
Yeah.
like your food,
Tell us.
I promise you, the server
is
will
not going to
prefer-
be mad at you.
Yeah, they'd prefer you have good food in front of you and you're enjoying yourself than you sit in silence.
Yeah, I was literally saying this today. There is no reason that you should suffer in silence, chewing on your well done steak for 30 minutes, only
Right.
getting like 3 bites in because it's taking so long.
As a
when you
server-
ordered medium rare.
Yeah, as a server, I want you to get your money's worth.
Yeah. I mean, if you're paying like
Dinner and a show, let's do it, you know?
Exactly. And I feel like, I promise you, like, again, your server is never going to be mad at you for, like, speaking up. Because at the end of the day, your server's not the one back there cooking it. Like, they're not offended if you don't like the food, I promise.
Yeah.
So,
Sometimes they don't like it either.
exactly, you know?
So,
and a good server will tell you.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we really appreciate that advice, Kimberly. And again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being
Thank
a part
you
of this
for having me.
podcast. Hope to see you again soon on a later episode.
Absolutely, I'll be more than happy to be back.
Alrighty. Well, thank you guys again so much for tuning into the Life and Service. It was so great having this chat with Kim today. I really appreciated it. We've worked in the service industry together for a while now, so it was really great to connect over this. Thank you guys again for watching and for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye.